The train lurched to a stop at Jerome, Arizona Territory, in late September of 1881, and Zelda Ashford stepped onto the platform with nothing but a worn carpetbag, a faded blue dress, and hope that felt heavier than any physical possession she could have carried. Dust swirled around her ankles as she searched the sparse crowd for a man she had never met, someone who knew her only through carefully worded letters exchanged over 3 months. The mining town of Jerome clung to the side of Mingus Mountain like a stubborn promise, buildings scattered at impossible angles across the steep terrain. Zelda had traveled from Missouri after her parents died of cholera, leaving her with debts she could never repay and a future that looked bleaker with each passing day. Marriage to a stranger seemed less frightening than the alternative. Miss Ashford. The voice came from behind her, deep and uncertain. She turned to find a tall man in his late 20s, broad-shouldered beneath a dusty work shirt, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that needed cutting. His eyes were the color of creek water in summer, green with flecks of gold, and they studied her with equal parts hope and trepidation. "Mr. Dalton Cross?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Yes, madam." He removed his hat, revealing more of a face that was handsome in a rugged, honest way. "I hope your journey was not too difficult." "It was long," she admitted, gripping her bag tighter, "but I am here now." They stood awkwardly for a moment, two strangers bound by correspondence and desperation. Finally, Dalton reached for her bag. "My wagon is just over here. The ranch is about 12 miles northwest, away from the mining operations. Better grazing land, cleaner water." As they walked through Jerome, Zelda took in the chaotic energy of a boom town. Miners shouted to each other, hammers rang against metal, and the acrid smell of smelting copper hung in the air. Women were scarce, and she felt eyes following her progress down the rutted street. "It gets quieter once we leave town," Dalton said, helping her into a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 horses. "The ranch is peaceful. You will like it, I hope." The ride gave them their first real opportunity to talk beyond the carefully composed letters. Dalton explained how he had claimed his land 5 years ago, building his herd slowly, surviving harsh winters and drought. He had 100 head of cattle now, good horses, and a house he had built with his own hands. "Why did you send for a bride?" Zelda asked, watching his profile as he drove. "Surely there are women here who might have considered marriage." His jaw tightened slightly. "The kind of women in Jerome are mostly looking for miners who strike it rich. I am just a rancher, and I want a wife who understands what that means. Hard work, simple living, but honest." He glanced at her. "Your letters said you were not afraid of hard work." "I am not," she said firmly. "I helped my father run our farm before he took sick. I can cook, so tend animals, preserve food. I am not expecting luxury, Mr. Cross." "Dalton," he corrected gently. "And I will call you Zelda if that suits you." "It suits me fine." The landscape changed as they climbed away from Jerome, the mining operations giving way to rolling hills dotted with juniper and piñon pines. The air smelled cleaner, touched with sage and the earthy scent of approaching autumn. Zelda felt something in her chest loosen slightly. This looked like land where a person could breathe, could build something lasting. The ranch appeared as they crested a ridge. A sturdy log house sat in a small valley, with a barn, corrals, and several outbuildings arranged practically around a well. It was not grand, but it looked solid and well-maintained. Mountains rose in the distance, purple-blue against the late afternoon sky. "It is beautiful," Zelda said, and meant it. Dalton's shoulders relaxed visibly. "I am glad you think so. Come, I will show you inside." The house was simple but thoughtfully made. One large main room served as kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. Two smaller rooms branched off, one clearly Dalton's bedroom, the other set up as a guest room with a narrow bed and a trunk. "I thought you might want your own space," Dalton said, his ears reddening slightly, "until we get to know each other better. We can marry whenever you feel ready, or not at all if you find this arrangement unsuitable. I will not force anything on you." Zelda set down her carpetbag and turned to face him fully. "You are very different from what I expected. Better or worse?" "Different," she repeated, allowing herself a small smile. "Your letters were formal, practical. I expected someone harder, perhaps." "I am not good with words on paper," Dalton admitted. "I am better at showing than telling." He moved to the kitchen area, where a fire was already laid in the stove. "Let me make you some coffee. You must be exhausted." As he worked, Zelda studied him more closely. His hands were scarred and calloused but moved with competence. He carried himself with quiet confidence, someone comfortable in his own skin. When he handed her a tin cup of strong coffee, their fingers brushed, and she felt a small jolt of awareness. They spent the evening talking more easily than Zelda had anticipated. Dalton told her about his childhood in Texas, how he had left after his parents died in a Comanche raid, unable to stay on land soaked with bad memories. He had drifted for years, working cattle drives and ranch jobs, until he found this valley and decided to stop running. Zelda shared her own story more fully than she had in letters. The slow deterioration of her family's fortunes, her father's illness, her mother's grief, and finally the crushing loneliness of being utterly alone in the world at 22 years old. "You are not alone anymore," Dalton said quietly. "Whatever happens between us, you have a home here for as long as you want it." That night, lying in the narrow bed in the small room, Zelda listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Horses nickering in the corral, the wind moving through the pines, the creak of timber as the house settled. For the first time in months, she felt the tight knot of fear in her stomach begin to ease. Maybe, just maybe, this desperate gamble would work out. The next morning, Zelda woke to the smell of bacon frying. She dressed quickly and emerged to find Dalton cooking breakfast, the table already set for two. "I usually eat early," he said apologetically. "The animals need tending at first light, but you sleep as late as you like until you adjust." "I am used to early mornings," Zelda assured him, taking a seat. "What can I do to help today?" They fell into an easy routine over the following days. Dalton showed her around the property, introduced her to his horses and cattle, explained his operations. Zelda took over the cooking and household tasks, discovering his pantry was better stocked than she had expected. He had clearly prepared for her arrival, laying in flour, sugar, coffee, and other staples. She also discovered Dalton was a man of few words but consistent action. If he said he would do something, it was done. He treated her with unfailing courtesy, never entering her room, always asking before making decisions that affected them both. Yet there was warmth beneath his reserve, glimpses of humor and kindness that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. 1 week after her arrival, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, Dalton cleared his throat. "I have been thinking," he began carefully, "about us getting married proper. I do not want to rush you, but winter comes hard up here. If we are wed, there would be no question about propriety, and you would have legal claim to the ranch if anything happened to me." Zelda had been thinking the same thing. She turned to look at him, this man who had given her shelter and asked nothing in return. "I am ready," she said simply. "You have been nothing but kind to me, Dalton. I believe we can build a good life together." His face broke into a genuine smile, transforming his serious features. "Truly." truly. They married 3 days later in Jerome, with the circuit preacher officiating and 2 minors as witnesses. Zelda wore her best dress, which was still just the faded blue one she had arrived in, but Dalton looked at her as if she were draped in silk. He bought her a simple gold band from the general store, and when he slipped it onto her finger, his hand trembled slightly. "I promise to be a good husband to you," he said solemnly, "to provide for you, protect you, and respect you always." "And I promise to be a good wife," Zelda replied, her voice catching, "to stand beside you in all things." When the preacher pronounced them married, Dalton kissed her gently, barely a brush of lips, but Zelda felt warmth spread through her entire body. They had supper at Jerome's only proper restaurant, a luxury that made Zelda laugh with delight at the extravagance. Dalton watched her enjoyment with pleasure, insisting she try the apple pie, which turned out to be the best thing she had tasted in months. The ride back to the ranch felt different. Zelda was hyper-aware of Dalton beside her, his solid presence, the capable way he handled the horses. When they arrived home, full darkness had fallen and stars blazed overhead in impossible numbers. Dalton helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist. "Zelda," he said softly, "I meant what I said about not forcing anything. We can take this slow." She looked up at him, this good man who had given her so much already. "I am your wife now," she said, placing her hand on his chest, feeling his heart beat strong and fast. "And I want to be your wife in all ways." He cupped her face gently, searching her eyes for any doubt. Finding none, he kissed her again, deeper this time, and Zelda felt something kindle inside her. He led her into the house, into his bedroom which was now theirs, and showed her with tenderness and patience what it meant to be truly cherished. Later, wrapped in his arms, Zelda marveled at the turn her life had taken. A month ago, she had been desperate and alone. Now she lay beside a man who had given her not just security but genuine care, and she felt the first stirrings of something deeper than gratitude. The weeks that followed brought them closer. Dalton taught Zelda to ride better, and she proved a quick study, soon accompanying him as he checked the herd and mended fences. She showed him how to make bread that did not taste like rocks, and his delight in fresh baked goods made her laugh. They worked side by side preparing for winter, preserving food, checking the barn for gaps, chopping firewood. In the evenings they sat by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes simply comfortable in shared silence. And at night, they came together with increasing passion and understanding, learning each other's bodies and hearts. October brought the first cold snap, and with it, trouble. Dalton came back from checking the north pasture with a grim expression. "Found 2 steers dead," he told Zelda. "Throats cut, left to rot. This was not predators." "Rustlers?" Zelda asked, fear clutching her stomach. "Maybe, or someone trying to send a message." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "There is a bigger rancher about 20 miles east, Marcus Henderson. He has been buying up land, trying to consolidate. He made me an offer for this place last year. I refused. Do you think he would do this? I do not know for certain, but I need to be more vigilant." Dalton checked his rifle, his jaw set. "I hate leaving you alone, but I need to ride out and check the rest of the herd." "Then I am coming with you," Zelda said firmly. He started to protest, then saw her expression. "You know how to shoot, my father taught me. I am a fair shot with a rifle." Dalton nodded slowly. "All right. But you stay close to me." They found 3 more dead cattle over the next 2 days, all killed the same way. The losses hurt, but worse was the sense of violation. Someone was striking at what Dalton had built, trying to drive him off his land. On the 3rd day, they found the culprits. 3 men were in the process of herding a dozen of Dalton's cattle toward the eastern boundary when Dalton and Zelda rode up on them. The men wore bandanas over their faces, but their postures radiated guilt and aggression. "Those are my cattle," Dalton called out, his hand resting on his rifle. "Turn them back," says who. One of the men jeered. "These look like strays to me." "You know damn well they are not strays. This is theft, and I will defend my property." The tension stretched taut. Zelda could feel her heart hammering, but she kept her rifle ready, just as Dalton had shown her. "There are 3 of us and 1 of you," another man said. "Maybe you should just ride away, rancher." "2 of us," Zelda said clearly, raising her rifle. "And we are not going anywhere." The men shifted uneasily. Apparently they had not expected armed resistance. "Marcus Henderson sent you?" Dalton asked. "Tell him I am not selling. Not now, not ever. And if I find anyone on my land again, they had better be ready to answer for it with more than words." One of the men reached for his gun, and Dalton's rifle fired in the same instant, kicking up dirt at the man's horse's feet. The animal reared, nearly throwing its rider. "The next shot goes higher," Dalton said coldly. "Leave. Now." The men exchanged glances, then wheeled their horses and rode off, leaving the cattle behind. Dalton did not lower his rifle until they were well out of range. "Are you all right?" he asked Zelda, his voice tight with worry. "Yes," she said, though her hands were shaking now that the danger had passed. "Are you?" He pulled her close with his free arm. "I am sorry. I never wanted to bring you into danger." "You did not bring me into anything," Zelda said fiercely. "This is my home too, my future. I will fight for it just as hard as you will." The look Dalton gave her was filled with such warmth and pride that Zelda felt it down to her toes. "I do not deserve you," he said softly. "Yes, you do," she whispered back. "We deserve each other." They got the cattle back to the main herd and spent the rest of the day reinforcing their defenses. That night, Dalton rode into Jerome to report the incident to the territorial marshal, though both of them doubted much would come of it. Henderson was a powerful man with connections. The marshal, a weary-looking man named Tom Garrett, listened to Dalton's story and sighed. "I believe you, Cross, but without proof Henderson ordered it, my hands are tied. Best I can do is ride out and talk to him, let him know we are watching." "That is all I ask," Dalton said. Marshal Garrett looked at him seriously. "Watch your back. Men like Henderson do not take no for an answer easily. He wants this whole valley under his control." As they rode home under a sky heavy with approaching winter, Zelda moved her horse closer to Dalton's. "What will we do if he tries again?" "We keep fighting," Dalton said. "This land is ours, Zelda. I built something here from nothing, and now I have you to build a future with. I am not giving that up without a fight." "Then we fight together," she said. November brought snow, and with it, a temporary reprieve. The mountain passes became difficult to navigate, and rustling activity died down. Dalton and Zelda found themselves snowed in for days at a time, which proved to be a blessing in disguise. Forced into close quarters, they talked for hours, sharing dreams and fears, discovering the depths of compatibility. Zelda learned that Dalton loved poetry but was too embarrassed to read it aloud. She coaxed him into reciting verses by the fire, his deep voice turning the words into something beautiful. Dalton discovered that Zelda had a wonderful singing voice and would hum while she worked. He begged her to sing properly, and she finally relented, filling the house with old ballads that made his heart ache with their beauty. They made love with the snow falling outside, the fire crackling, the world reduced to just the 2 of them. And somewhere during those long winter days and nights, gratitude and liking transformed into something deeper and truer. One evening in mid-December, as they sat wrapped in blankets by the fire, Zelda turned to Dalton and said, "I love you." The words hung in the air, precious and fragile. Dalton stared at her, his green eyes reflecting the firelight. "I did not mean to say it yet," Zelda continued, flushing. "But it is true. I love you, Dalton Cross. Not because you gave me a home or security, but because of who you are. Your kindness, your strength, your gentle heart." Dalton pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have loved you since the day you stepped off that train looking terrified but determined. I loved your courage, your resilience. And every day since, I have loved you more." They kissed, and it felt like a promise being sealed, a future being written. Christmas came, and though they had no fancy decorations or presents, it was the happiest holiday either of them could remember. Dalton surprised Zelda with a beautiful saddle he had been secretly tooling. Her initials worked into the leather. Zelda gave him a warm winter coat she had sewn from wool fabric she had carefully hoarded, staying up late by candlelight to finish it. "How did you afford the fabric?" Dalton asked, running his hands over the excellent stitching. Zelda smiled mysteriously. "I have been taking in sewing from some of the miners' wives in Jerome. They pay well, and it gives me something productive to do during the long winter days." "You never cease to amaze me," Dalton said, pulling her into his lap. "My resourceful, brilliant wife." The new year of 1882 arrived with brutal cold but also hope. The cattle had survived the worst of winter in good shape, and Dalton's careful management meant they had plenty of hay stored. More importantly, there had been no more trouble from Henderson or his men. In February, Zelda woke feeling queasy. At first, she dismissed it as something she had eaten, but when the nausea continued for several days, realization dawned. She was pregnant. She waited to tell Dalton, wanting to be certain, but her body confirmed what her heart already knew. One evening after supper, as he sat reading by the fire, she came and knelt beside his chair. "Dalton, I have something to tell you." He immediately set his book aside, searching her face. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine," she assured him, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "Better than fine. We are going to have a baby." The look of wonder that spread across his face made tears spring to Zelda's eyes. "A baby," he whispered. "Truly, truly." "Probably sometime in late September, if I am calculating right." Dalton slid from the chair to kneel with her, cradling her face in his hands. "You have given me everything," he said, his voice breaking. "Hope, love, now this. How did I get so fortunate?" "We both got fortunate," Zelda said, kissing him. "We found each other." That night, they lay in bed making plans for the future. They would need to add a room to the house before the baby came. Dalton wanted to buy more breeding stock, expand the operation so he could provide better for his growing family. Zelda suggested they might hire some help, someone to assist with the heavier ranch work, so Dalton was not stretched so thin. "I do not want you working too hard," Dalton fretted, his hand protectively on her belly. "Not while you are carrying our child." "I am pregnant, not fragile," Zelda laughed. "Women have been having babies and working ranches since the beginning of time, but I promise to be careful." Spring arrived with an explosion of green, and with it, more trouble. Marshal Garrett rode out in early April with grim news. Marcus Henderson had filed a claim disputing Dalton's property boundaries, saying that a surveying error meant a large portion of Dalton's best grazing land actually belonged to Henderson's spread. "It is nonsense," Garrett said, "but he has lawyers, and they are making it complicated." "You will need to hire your own lawyer, go to court in Prescott." Dalton felt sick. Lawyers and court costs could bankrupt him. "How can he do this? My claim has been filed for 5 years. Rich men can do a lot of things," Garrett said bitterly. "I am sorry, Cross. This is not right, but it is how things work." After the marshal left, Dalton sat on the porch with his head in his hands. Zelda came out and sat beside him, taking his hand. "We will fight this," she said. "We will find the money somehow." "We cannot afford a lawyer like Henderson can," Dalton said despairingly. "He will drag this out until we are broke." Zelda was quiet for a moment, thinking. What about our neighbors? Surely we are not the only small rancher Henderson is threatening. If others are facing the same pressure, maybe we could pool resources, hire one good lawyer between us. Dalton looked at her with dawning hope. That might work. The Jacobson place to the south and the Riley spread to the west. They are both good people, struggling just like us. Over the next week, Dalton visited their neighbors and found they were indeed facing similar problems. Henderson was systematically trying to squeeze out all the small operators, consolidating power through legal intimidation and outright theft. Together, the three families pooled their money and hired a lawyer from Prescott, a sharp young man named William Foster, who had a reputation for standing up to powerful interests. Foster reviewed their claims and property documents and declared them all rock solid. "Henderson is banking on you not being able to afford to fight," Foster explained. "But if we present a united front, show the judge that this is part of a pattern of harassment, we can win this." The case took months to work through the territorial court system. During that time, Zelda's pregnancy progressed, her belly swelling with new life. Dalton doted on her, insisting she rest more, worrying constantly about her health and the stress of the legal battle. "I am fine," Zelda kept assuring him. "Our baby is strong just like us." In June, they went to Prescott for the hearing. The territorial judge listened to both sides, reviewed the documents, and ultimately ruled in favor of Dalton and his fellow ranchers. Henderson's claims were dismissed, and the judge issued a stern warning about filing frivolous lawsuits. Henderson left the courthouse with fury in his eyes, but there was nothing more he could legally do. Dalton, Zelda, and their neighbors celebrated quietly, relief washing over them. "It is really over?" Zelda asked as they prepared to head home. "It is over," Dalton confirmed, pulling her close. "We won, sweetheart. Our home is safe." Summer passed peacefully. Dalton hired a young cowhand named Billy to help with the daily work, freeing him up to focus on expansion and preparation for the baby. He built a beautiful addition to the house, a sunny room that would serve as a nursery. Zelda sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart full of anticipation. Their neighbors, bonded by their shared struggle, became close friends. The Jacobsons and Rileys visited regularly, and the women fussed over Zelda's pregnancy, sharing advice and hand-me-down baby items. In late September, as the aspens turned gold on the mountainsides, Zelda went into labor. It was a long, difficult night, with Dalton pacing anxiously while Martha Jacobson and Ellen Riley attended to Zelda. But as dawn broke over the mountains, a baby's cry filled the house. "It is a boy," Martha announced, bringing the squalling infant to Dalton. "A healthy, strong boy." Dalton took his son with shaking hands, marveling at the tiny, perfect features. "Zelda," he asked anxiously. "She is fine," Ellen assured him. "Tired but fine. Go see your wife." Dalton entered the bedroom to find Zelda pale but smiling, her hair damp with sweat. "We have a son," he said wonderingly, placing the baby in her arms. Zelda looked down at their child, tears streaming down her face. "He is perfect, absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Dalton asked, sitting carefully on the bed beside them. They had discussed names but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Zelda said, "What about Samuel, after your father?" Dalton's eyes filled with tears. "Samuel Cross. Yes, that is perfect." Those first weeks with baby Samuel were exhausting and wonderful. Dalton proved to be a devoted father, waking with Zelda for nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours simply watching his son sleep. Billy took over more of the ranch work, allowing Dalton to be present for his family. Zelda, despite her exhaustion, felt more content than she ever had. Watching Dalton with Samuel, seeing the gentle tenderness he showed their child, made her fall in love with him all over again. One evening in October, as they sat together with Samuel sleeping peacefully in Zelda's arms, Dalton said quietly, "Do you ever think about how different your life would be if you had not gotten on that train?" Zelda considered. "Sometimes, but I cannot imagine it anymore. This life, with you, with Samuel, this is the only life I want. Coming here with nothing but hope was the best decision I ever made." "And I gave you everything else," Dalton teased gently, referencing his original advertisement for a mail-order bride. "You gave me love," Zelda corrected. Everything else came from that. Winter returned, but this time their house was filled with baby sounds and laughter. Samuel thrived, growing plump and happy. Dalton's herd continued to prosper, and the legal victory over Henderson had brought unexpected benefits. Other small ranchers in the territory had heard about their successful united front, and several had reached out to Dalton for advice on organizing similar cooperatives. By spring of 1883, Dalton found himself becoming a leader in the local ranching community, respected for his integrity and willingness to stand up to powerful interests. He used this influence carefully, always advocating for fair treatment and honest dealing. Zelda, meanwhile, had turned her sewing skills into a thriving small business. Miners' wives and Jerome townswomen came to her for fine work, paying well for her talent. She saved every penny, building a nest egg for emergencies and Samuel's future. On their second wedding anniversary, Dalton surprised Zelda with a beautiful piano shipped all the way from Denver at enormous expense. It was the most extravagant thing he had ever done. "Dalton, we cannot afford this," Zelda protested, even as her fingers itched to touch the gleaming keys. "We can," he assured her. "The ranch is doing well, better than ever, and I have heard you humming while you work, seen the longing in your eyes when the church piano plays. You should have music in your life, Zelda. You bring so much music to mine." She cried then, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness, and played for him that night, filling their home with melodies that made Samuel coo with delight and brought tears to Dalton's eyes. Life settled into a rhythm that felt almost too good to be true. But then, in summer of 1883, Marcus Henderson died suddenly of a heart attack. His widow, a practical woman with no interest in ranching, sold off his holdings and moved back east. The threat that had loomed over them for so long simply evaporated. "I cannot believe it is truly over," Zelda said when they heard the news. "It is over," Dalton confirmed. "We can finally just live our lives without looking over our shoulders, and that is exactly what they did." Samuel grew into a curious, energetic toddler who followed his father everywhere, learning about horses and cattle and the land. Dalton taught him with patience and humor, clearly relishing fatherhood. In fall of 1884, Zelda discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news came with less surprise but equal joy. Their second child, a daughter they named Sarah, arrived in spring of 1885, a small, delicate baby with Zelda's dark hair and Dalton's green eyes. "Now we have one of each," Dalton said contentedly, holding Sarah while Samuel clambered onto the bed to meet his sister. "Are you satisfied?" Zelda teased. "Or shall we try for more? As many as you want to give me," Dalton said seriously. "I never imagined I would have this, a family, a home filled with love. However many children you want, I will welcome them all." They ended up with 5 children over the next decade. After Samuel and Sarah came twin boys, Matthew and Michael, in 1887, and finally another daughter, Lucy, in 1889. The house expanded to accommodate the growing family, and their lives became a beautiful chaos of children, animals, and the endless rhythms of ranch life. Through it all, Dalton and Zelda's love only deepened. They still made time for each other, stolen moments in the barn, late nights on the porch after the children were asleep. They worked as true partners, respecting each other's strengths, supporting each other through challenges. The ranch prospered beyond their early dreams. Dalton's reputation for quality cattle spread, and he commanded premium prices. He invested wisely, buying more land when opportunities arose, always careful never to overextend like Henderson had done. By the early 1890s, the Cross Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the territory. Zelda's sewing business evolved into a dress shop in Jerome, run by a woman she had trained, with Zelda providing designs and oversight. The income was substantial, and Zelda took pride in being a financial contributor to the family's success. But more than material success, they built a legacy of love. Their children grew up watching their parents treat each other with respect and affection, learning that marriage could be a true partnership. Samuel became a fine young man who wanted to take over the ranch someday. Sarah showed artistic talent and dreamed of studying art in San Francisco. The twins were inseparable troublemakers who kept everyone laughing. And Lucy, the baby, was spoiled by everyone but somehow remained sweet-natured. On a golden afternoon in October of 1895, Dalton and Zelda stood on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Samuel, now 13, was teaching 8-year-old Sarah to rope a fence post. The 10-year-old twins were racing their ponies, and 6-year-old Lucy was making flower crowns. 14 years, Zelda said softly. 14 years since I stepped off that train, terrified and alone. Dalton pulled her close. Best day of my life when you arrived. Even with all the trouble, the rustlers, the legal battles, the hard winters. Especially with all that, Dalton said firmly. We faced it together and we are stronger for it. Look at what we built, Zelda. Not just the ranch, but this family, this life. It is more than I ever dreamed possible. Zelda leaned into his embrace, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of amber and rose. I came here with nothing but hope, she mused, just a desperate wish for something better. And I gave you everything else, Dalton asked, echoing their old conversation. Zelda turned in his arms to look up at him, this man who had been a stranger and became her whole world. His face was more weathered now, lined with years of sun and wind, but his eyes still held that warmth that had drawn her from the first. Gray threaded through his dark hair, and she knew her own appearance had changed too, marked by the years and childbearing. But the love between them had only grown richer, deeper, more essential. You gave me everything, Zelda agreed. But more than that, we gave each other everything. We built this together, Dalton. Every bit of it. He kissed her then, a sweet kiss full of history and promise, and their children groaned dramatically at the sight of their parents being affectionate again. You will understand someday, Dalton called to them, laughing. When you find someone who makes your whole world make sense. That evening, after the children were finally in bed, Dalton and Zelda sat on their porch under a sky full of stars. The mountains rose dark against the twilight, and the smell of pine and sage drifted on the cool breeze. Do you ever regret it? Dalton asked quietly. Answering my advertisement, taking such a risk on a stranger? Never, Zelda said firmly. Not even for a moment. You are the best decision I ever made, Dalton Cross. And you are my miracle, he replied. My mail-order bride who came with nothing but hope and gave me everything I never knew I needed. They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the stars wheel overhead. Inside, their children slept safely. Around them, their ranch sprawled across land they had fought for and earned. Ahead of them stretched years yet to come, years they would face together with the same courage and love that had brought them this far. The Arizona Territory was harsh and beautiful, demanding everything from those who tried to tame it. But for Dalton and Zelda Cross, it had also been generous, giving them a life richer than gold, filled with love deeper than any mine shaft, and a future as bright as the endless sky. Their story had started with a desperate advertisement and a leap of faith. It had continued through hardship and joy, struggle and triumph. And it would go on, written in the lives of their children and grandchildren, a testament to what two people could build when they chose courage over fear, love over safety, and each other over all else. As the years continued to pass, the Cross family became a cornerstone of the community. When Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, Dalton was invited to the ceremony as a representative of the ranching interests that had helped build the territory. He went with Zelda by his side, their hair now silver but their hands still firmly clasped. Samuel did take over the ranch, running it with the same integrity his father had modeled. Sarah went to San Francisco to study art and became a successful painter, though she returned to Arizona often, saying the light and landscape called to her soul. The twins became partners in a horse breeding operation that gained national recognition. And Lucy married a veterinarian, using her natural affinity with animals to help her husband build a thriving practice serving ranchers throughout the region. Through all the changes, all the years, Dalton and Zelda remained each other's constant. They grew old together gracefully, finding joy in grandchildren, in quiet mornings on the porch, in the simple pleasure of still being together after so many years. On their 30th anniversary, their children threw them a grand party. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, filling the ranch with laughter and music. Zelda played the piano, her fingers still nimble despite arthritis, while Dalton sang beside her in a voice gone rough with age but still full of love. When someone asked the secret to their long, happy marriage, Dalton and Zelda exchanged a look that spoke volumes. "We chose each other," Zelda said simply. "Every day, through everything, we kept choosing each other. And we built something together," Dalton added. "Not just a ranch or a family, but a life that honored what we both brought to it." She came with hope, and together we turned that hope into something real and lasting. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Dalton and Zelda found themselves alone on the porch once more, in the spot where they had spent countless evenings over 3 decades. 30 years, Dalton marveled. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I met you at that train station. Other times it feels like I have known you my whole life." "Both can be true," Zelda said wisely. "The heart does not measure time the way a clock does." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the familiar night sounds of the ranch. Cattle lowing in the distance, horses moving in the corral, crickets singing in the grass. The same sounds that had filled their nights for 3 decades, a symphony of home. "I would do it all again," Zelda said suddenly. "Every hard moment, every struggle, every fear, I would do it all again to end up right here, right now with you." Dalton pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, still faintly lavender after all these years. "As would I," he said. "You are my greatest adventure, Zelda, my greatest joy." The moon rose over the mountains, full and bright, bathing the ranch in silver light. Somewhere in the house, a grandchild cried briefly and was soothed back to sleep. Life continued its eternal rhythms: birth and growth, struggle and triumph, love and loss and love again. But here on this porch, in this moment, Two people who had taken a chance on each other 3 decades ago sat wrapped in the warmth of a life well lived together. A mail-order bride and a lonely rancher who had become so much more than those simple labels could ever convey. They were partners, lovers, best friends, parents, grandparents. They were survivors of hardship and celebrants of joy. They were the foundation upon which a family had been built, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. But most of all, they were proof that sometimes, taking a leap of faith, choosing hope over certainty, and opening your heart to possibility can lead to something extraordinary. As they finally rose to head inside, Dalton paused at the door and looked back at the land spread out before them, the ranch they had built, the life they had created. "Thank you," he said softly to Zelda, "for taking a chance on a stranger's advertisement, for being brave enough to hope." "Thank you," Zelda replied, "for being worthy of that hope, for giving me not just a home but a reason to believe in miracles again." They went inside together, closing the door on another perfect evening, already looking forward to the morning when they would wake beside each other once more and continue the beautiful, ordinary, extraordinary life they had built together. The years ahead would bring more joys and sorrows, as life always does. They would welcome more grandchildren, weather more storms, face the inevitable losses that come with age. But they would face it all together, just as they had faced everything else since that September day in 1881, when a desperate young woman and a lonely rancher took a chance on each other. And in the end, when their time finally came, they would leave behind more than just land and legacy. They would leave behind proof that love, real love, built on respect and partnership and daily choice, could not only survive but thrive in even the harshest conditions. The Wild West demanded strength, courage, and resilience. Dalton and Zelda had those qualities in abundance. But what truly set them apart, what made their story special, was that they had found those qualities not just within themselves, but within each other. A mail-order bride who came with nothing but hope, a rancher who gave her everything else. But in truth, they had given each other the greatest gift of all, a love story for the ages, written not in grand gestures but in daily kindnesses, shared struggles, mutual respect, and the simple, profound choice to face life together. And that love story, born in desperation and forged in the fires of frontier life, endured as a testament to the transformative power of taking chances, choosing courage, and believing that sometimes hope is enough to build a miracle upon. Their ranch would continue for generations. Their children would carry on their values, and the community they had helped build would remember them fondly. But perhaps their greatest legacy was simply this: they had loved each other well, and that love had created ripples that would touch lives far beyond their own. In the end, that was everything.